morning, everybody. I'm Evelyn Thoren. I'm your host for the Dawn Patrol from 6 to 7 o'clock this morning, and then from 7 to 8 we have City Life. Please stay with us for that. Sometimes some of you just join us for that, but you can't hear us since you're not joining us now. My co-hosts Sam Chase and Bob Hoey are here. John McDonough is behind the camera, sometimes on the camera, and we are 6 days out from Christmas. We wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and all of the different things if you don't believe and if you do believe. So we have Paul Cohen coming in at 7 o'clock. He can give us some updates as far as what's going on in the town of Chelmsford. You can see on your screen, there's the town manager. Excuse me. And if you want to text something, a question, or you would like to be on the air to have a discussion on whatever we're talking about, you can see at the bottom of your screen the telephone number 978-808-8200. And you can also use Messenger. We're on YouTube. So there's a lot of opportunity. If you want to give us an opinion, we're willing to address it. And in some cases, we may not address it. It just depends. So any of the opinions usually are our own or somebody else's on the show, and it's not reflective of any of the policies. We try to maintain a level of civility, but we, unscripted show, whatever comes to mind, that's the way it goes. We don't have any monitor where something has been written out for us to read. So are you guys all ready for Christmas, or do you guys leave it up to your wives to do all of that stuff?
I think we're almost done. All the boxes are lining up downstairs in the cellar. It's amazing. That's all I do is go to the porch, bring another box in, and
that's your contribution.
Keep your mouth quiet. Don't say anything.
Very smart, Bob.
Yeah, that's what happens as you get a little older, right, Sam?
Well,
you learn. I'm doing the wife's job right now. She's helping her mother out that's 96. I know your mother's 102, right?
103.
103.
She'll be 104 in the spring
That's
if she
unbelievable.
makes it.
It's great
I'm
to hear
assuming
things
she's
like
going to
that.
make it.
unbelievable.
I know, that's the way we look at it. But
I've
at
been
some point, she's going to run out of money real fast.
But my wife, anyways, has really enabled us to know how to do nothing. I mean, I'm the only one other than my wife that knows how to cook. So I've been doing all the cooking, all the house cleaning, because she's trying to help her mother, which is 96, and I got to say, okay, she's just down the street, go ahead. So I haven't lived with my wife really for a couple of weeks, and I tell you, I don't like it. It's the hardest job I've ever had. There's 3 adults in my house, and without my wife there, it's amazing.
It is.
It's amazing.
Well, you know the old song that says you don't know what you've got till it's gone, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I had 3 grandchildren and a dog this weekend with my wife out of town, all right? So it was a little hectic, you know.
I have 2 cats, so
Yeah.
don't forget that.
Well-
They drive you crazy, too.
Right, yeah, it was
Yeah.
not as much work
Well, they
as...
must be younger.
Oh, they work. Sam, I'm telling you, my cats tell me when they want to go out, scratch on doors to come back in. They drive you almost...
Yeah, but at least they do that themselves. The cats are, I think, less work than a dog.
Oh, yeah.
So,
And they kill a lot of mice. When
Yeah.
you live near railroad tracks, you need cats.
yeah, I think so. But, so, you know, I had a good time, but when my wife got back late Sunday night, I said, you know, she said, well, I hope everything went fine. I said, look, this is actually good, you know, because it's a good reminder for me how much you do contribute and how essential you are. And I said, that's not a bad thing, you know, to be on your own every once in a while to get that reminder. So, you know.
Yeah, but when you have a woman or your mother, grandmother, and they do everything, I mean, you can walk right out of your clothes. It was amazing. I've never really, like, look at what you did today, all of yous. Yous all brought me a Christmas gift. I didn't bring anything because my wife does it all. I never go out to shop. I'm a very lucky man. I'm not lying. I'm very lucky.
Well, I have the same situation. We've been married 46 years, and I haven't bought a single article of clothing for myself in 46 years.
She'll yell at me now for talking
All
about
right?
this.
That's okay.
She's going to yell at me. She's going to say, you should have bought something. But I
Well,
don't think like that. I'm sorry.
My
It's
husband
just-
usually, like, when we were first married, I picked out a tie. Because my mother always picked out my father's ties. I mean, I was following along with what it was that I remembered. And Glenn goes, don't pick out my ties, please. I'll pick out my ties. And then there was something else, and he says,
Oh,
no,
there you
don't do
go.
that. I thought, well, okay, you can go ahead and pick out all your own clothes. I really don't care. It's a lot less for me to think about, because I had the 3 boys. I had all kinds of
Right.
other things going on.
He'd rather buy his own clothes.
And if he wants to buy his own clothes, feel free. And then when we went out to Cornell University when he was working on his PhD in the late 70s, there were different things that he did, and he wanted me to iron his blue jeans and all that. I said, no, I'm not ironing your blue jeans. Nobody irons blue jeans.
Nobody has.
So he ironed his blue jeans. Well, when we came back and all the different things, for a while I tried to, and I didn't do a bad job, by the way. It's just that he happens to be picky. And I'm talking about the early 80s. And he made some comments about the ironing, and I said, look, if every time I do something you have a comment that you want it done slightly different, even though you've told me how to do it and I can take direction, you do it. So since the early 80s, he has always ironed his own shirts and his own clothes. I don't need my clothes ironed, because when I take them out of the dryer, I hang them up.
I very rarely, I mean, I will do it on occasion, if the occasion presents itself. I very rarely do laundry or iron, but.
Oh, he does the laundry. He
but
does
I
a
will
lot of
do
stuff.
it, you know, depending on what the, but, yeah, no, but I think in a good marriage, you know, you figure out who is better able to do what job, regardless of what, you know, society has said are gender roles, okay? There's nothing wrong with men doing housework or cooking. And there's nothing wrong with women cutting the grass and doing car maintenance.
I'm glad that you approve of all of that, considering what I do.
No, I mean, I just.
I'd rather cut the grass than do
Whoever
laundry.
is better able to do the job does it. I mean, and that's the way it's worked in our house. I mean, it's a funny story. My wife will tell you, because she thinks it's funny. About 25 years ago, she decided she wanted to learn how to do yard work, right? I cut the grass and stuff. I said, all right. I said, that's not a bad thing. I said, for you to understand how to run the lawnmower and, you know. Well, she's not very mechanically minded, okay, which is fine. But we did it. She, you know, she did the lawn a few times. And in fact, I even went out and bought a second lawnmower. And I said, this is good. I said, because if the 2 of us do it, it'll get done twice as fast, right?
Was it a pink lawnmower?
No, it wasn't. It was just the same thing that I had, just a duplicate. Well, anyway, we did that. And then one time, she was mowing. And I guess she ran into a hedge or something, and it knocked the height of the mower down. And then she continued to mow. She called them skunk stripes on the lawn, because the mower had dropped like 2 inches, right? And she kept mowing. She didn't even notice, you know. And I came out and I said, what happened? I said,
We have to be quiet?
No, we could talk.
You're back up now.
Oh, thank
okay.
you.
See that?
That didn't last long.
Yeah,
That didn't last long.
A blip. We had a blip.
I gotta redo Facebook and YouTube. But that's my problem, not yours. Please continue.
Okay. Well, anyway, you said who's best able to do stuff. In our case, it's who can afford the time to do whatever it needs to be done.
No, that's part
And you
of it,
step
yeah.
up to the plate.
That's part
Glenn can do laundry. He loads the dishwasher. Doesn't do much cooking, which is fine. And sometimes he does, and he can make meals and things for himself if I am not available to do that. Sometimes like this morning, we have that Millstream meeting, and then from there I go down and take my mother to her doctor's. Well, I'm not going to be around for lunch, so he'll make himself something, and it all works out quite nicely. And as far as the yard goes, I'd rather be outside than doing anything on the inside.
Yeah, me too.
But there are techniques to doing certain tasks. As you said, you have to know a little bit more about the technology or the mechanical aspect of things, like with the lawnmower. But you also, over the years, I wanted to be the best I could at whatever it was, so I took seminars and asked people and surveyed, and so that I would know the most efficient way of doing any kind of housework, because I really don't like to do that, but I like everything clean. And so everybody can recount all of that stuff. So as far as Christmas goes, we're pretty well done. And it's interesting when we talk about that particular a holiday, how far ahead some people can actually, be done. Because I used to have a gift closet, so I would start in January. And as things were on sale, because I knew what the kids all
What are you
wanted.
doing 2024?
What am I doing now? What I do now is gift certificates, or I text my daughter-in-laws, they send me links to Amazon or other locations. I order everything, click, charge.
With the grandkids, I switched to
Sent.
cash.
Well, I'm not
Cash
doing,
is king, baby. That card goes right on the floor. That cash goes in the pocket. Oh, Papa, I love you. Thank you.
You know, I think you're right. As far as the kids are concerned, I think that's exactly right.
well, I like something more targeted with certain
Yep.
grandchildren.
I get a better hug than you.
Well, you live a lot closer. We only lived
I'm
behind
just telling you, cash is king, baby. Cash is queen.
Right, but I want to give kids what it is that they think they want, so they have a wish list, and when they go through that, then I pick and choose with regard to that. I mean, there's always money that is given. The gift certificates is a more targeted way of having them spend the money where they would like to spend it, but where I was trying to go with this
Do
was,
they have gift certificates at the pot store?
so one of the things that happened this year, which was slightly different, was one of my daughter-in-laws said, "Oh, they would like to," because I asked the question about concerts, and I had the conversation with one of my granddaughters. Of course, the tickets were far too expensive because then my daughter-in-law said, "Well, she'd like to take a friend. I'm not spending $400 on tickets so that my granddaughter can bring a friend." And so, in case they're listening, that's where, Grandma's going to be logical about this.
Yep, you're not going, sorry.
Right. I mean, if the other mother wants to step up and buy a ticket, I
Right.
don't care. But, I'm not buying another ticket at that price.
How much
So
are the tickets?
they were $160 before fees.
And what show?
Sam, you want to read this one, please?
We
I
can't
can't,
read anything
there's
because we're
nothing on
not
the
on the
monitor.
TV screen.
Oh, I will fix your wagon.
All right, as soon as it comes up, I'll read it.
There you go.
Good morning. It's all about upbringing. Our parents taught us how to be respectful and clean up after yourself. So many adults nowadays would rather play on their phone than parent. Well,
Good point.
that is true, and I say that based on my observation of younger parents, and I say younger, I mean, I'm almost 78 years old, and my daughters are in their 40s, so I'm talking about people in that age group, 30s and 40s, and I watch them with their children, and much of the time they are on their phones. They're looking at their phones as opposed to interacting with their kids. So
hear you.
that's true.
Sam, when you're brought up by a grandmother, okay,
Sam.
like I was,
Sam,
ni-
please don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Every time you tap it, I can hear it.
Oh,
Thank you.
1903, that's when my grandmother was born. That's who-
1903.
Yeah, that's who brought me up. And to me, Christmas was year-round. That's how good my grandmother was to me. It's always
You were lucky.
Christmas. So I'm not saying this is an excuse, but that's why I'm a little bit about, when I look at my grandchildren, I say, Christmas is year-round, because that's all we ever do is try to take care of our grandchildren as much as possible. I think it's my children I probably left behind, but they're in their 40s, so, it's about time I leave them behind.
But it's different. I mean, when you were younger and you had your children, you bring it up. I mean, you're trying to survive. I mean, you're trying to support your family, and it's a much different situation than when you have grandchildren, because now that's not your primary, well, of course it is with some grandparents, but mostly it's not your primary responsibility to support your grandchildren financially and look after their well-being that way. So it's a different relationship. The one thing I've learned with grandchildren is you go through life as we have, we raise your kids, and now you have grandchildren, and you look at your grandchildren and you realize, time is so precious. When you get older, you realize, so the way you look at your grandchildren is different, because you say, I want to have every minute that I can have with these kids, because they're only going to be children for a very short period of time. And you realize, at least I have realized, I look at this whole situation a lot differently than I did, 40 years ago when I was in my 30s.
Well, I
Your
think,
perspective changes 100%, with grandchildren.
right, I think with age comes a certain amount of wisdom.
I hope so.
But only if you're cognizant of it.
Right.
A lot of people out there that are clueless. And when the comment is made that the parents are on the telephone, on your devices and things.
Mm-hmm.
When I was brought up, my mother didn't interact with us very often. She was doing housework, she was cleaning, she was on the telephone with her friends. So maybe it doesn't matter what kind of a device you have. And if you wanted to have some kind of interaction, sometimes it was sit down, be quiet,
Well, it was different back then. My parents, you said your grandmother was born in 1903, and you and I aren't that far apart in age, but my parents were older. My parents were born in 1908. My parents, not my grandparents. And so I was raised by people who were young adults during the Depression, okay? And the attitude towards children.
What we're looking at here is 2024,
Yeah.
Red Square in Moscow. This is war-torn Russia.
There you go.
And look at the blast they have in there. They're having a wonderful time.
Good for them. I'm glad.
One of the audience sent me this video. Check out Moscow, how bad they're doing.
Don't judge all Russian citizens by their leader, okay?
Well, that's like the same thing
Right.
with any of the countries.
So,
And we'll get into politics
Putin
shortly.
is a creep, but that doesn't mean all his people are creeps. So,
Well, he's
Good
got them
to
under
have
their thumb.
Yeah.
Everybody's having a good time.
that's right.
And it looks like it snowed.
But let me finish my thought here.
Please
But
continue.
when we were brought up in the 50s, the way adults looked at children was completely different than today. Children in the 1950s were not people. The idea that as a child that my opinion would be solicited on anything, I would have passed out if my father had come in and said, gee, what do you think about this? Or what would you like for dinner? Forget it, okay? Children were seen and not heard.
Sam, you gotta look at the mic.
And that's the way it was. And that whole mentality has changed 100% in the last 40 or 50
Do
years.
you think, this is way out there in our thought process, do you think or believe, because of the age bracket of the people that run this country, or at least the ones that are currently running the country, is that they're,
Well, the new one coming in is about the same.
yeah, but his attitude is very different.
It is different, yes.
Is that attitude is the same with those 365,000 children that are missing? In the fact that, well, they're disposable, or they're collateral damage, or we really, they can say whatever they want, but their actions speak louder than words.
They
And
don't.
it shows that they don't know, that they're not caring
They
a whole
don't
lot.
care. They don't care.
Right, but that could be reflective of that age bracket with the way things are. Now, when I was brought up, again, it was be seen, not heard.
Yep.
And if you were asked a question and you went to answer the question, you were talking back. And at one point I said, well, if you ask me a question and I can't say anything, and you're telling me I talk back, do you want an answer? Well, that didn't go over very well either.
You were talking back if you gave an answer that they didn't like. If you
No, it
answered-
didn't matter what it was.
Well, that's the way it was in my house. If I was asked a question, I had to figure out what they wanted for an answer. And if I didn't get it right, then I was in trouble, okay? But
But anyway, that part is interesting. Now, we haven't been here for 2 weeks, and then the prior week I had a commitment, so I wasn't here, which was, there's so much stuff that's going on and everything, but there's been an awful lot of stuff that's gone on politically. Now, we have Paul Cohen coming in at 7 a.m., and he's usually a little early, which is great. And we'll ask him all the questions about Chelmsford and different things and some stuff I saw on Facebook this morning, which I'm sure, Sam, you know about. And we'll see where that all goes. But politically, there's an awful lot of stuff that has been happening. And I don't know if you have, an observation or an opinion in the fact that Biden doesn't appear to be the president Trump
Well, I got
does.
some text for you to read.
Well, he hasn't been for 4 years.
Oh, the phrase is, you can at Nana's house.
That's right.
That's the best.
That's right.
Christmas is exhausting. Best holiday is the 4th of July. Merry Christmas, everyone.
I like Thanksgiving.
Me
the
too.
best.
You and I agree on that. Yep, that's the
They're
best holiday.
home runs, Sam. They become buddies, not parents.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Well said.
my children are parents. and my daughter-in-laws. They are parents, and it's reflective in how the kids act.
And my daughter is a drill sergeant, so there you go. Oh,
But they're not quite that bad.
She's brutal.
And I'm not going to comment publicly with any of them because they are public figures. So
Where's parents' school? Sam, where's parents'
Yeah,
school?
no place you can go.
it's one of the careers, we'll put that in quotes,
Yep.
that you have that you don't need a degree with. However, if you take it seriously, and then we'll go into politics if you want to, we'll continue along this vein. If you take it seriously, which I did, because I didn't want to be the type of parent that my parents were, generally speaking. You pick and choose what it is you like. And so I read books. It wasn't Dr. Spock either, because that didn't go along with the way I wanted to do things. And also, being a teacher, you are taught how to control a classroom.
That's true.
And so in being a teacher and controlling a classroom, you can try to use some of those principles and apply them to what you do as a parent. But they are your children, so it's not exactly the same as someone else's children when you're trying to control them. So I read a lot of books, and I wanted to have it based in Christianity. So there were a lot of Christian authors, and pick and choose, no absolutes. And the church that I attended, some of the classes would be on parenting, and running a Christian household and what you could do and all the suggestions. And I went to seminars to see that. And then there was it really wasn't a camp, it was more like a Christian resort in upstate New York. And we went the week that they had somebody that was very well known, that was talking about family life and what you do, what you don't do. And again, you glean what it is you like. There are some absolutes here, but there isn't that, I heard this and I have to do that because that person told me I should do that. Some things work for you and some things may not work for your family. Genetics plays a big part in that, because, your children are like half of you, so you
Plus they
will
have their own personalities, and even within the same family. I have 3 grandchildren, and we're talking 3 different people here. They're not. It's not monolithic. Okay, so you have to adjust your parenting a little bit to accommodate somewhat the personality of the child.
And I didn't bring my 3 boys up to be exactly the same.
Right.
Because they were individuals.
And they're not the same. I know your sons, and they're not the same
Right,
people.
they're very different, and
Right.
that's because you approach it by supporting their strengths and trying to explain to them whatever the weaknesses are that they have on how to deal with that, and then how to deal with all the different things. And of course, I'm into cause and effect and consequences of your actions. So I would sit and I would say, all right, if you do this, this is what will happen. If you do this, this is what will happen. Or if you say this, the other person will say this, you'll say this, and when they, a lot of days, they'd come home, how did you know that? Well, if you take behavioral psychology, everything's predictable. Bob, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, listening to this conversation myself, I go, boy, what a totally different life I lived. I mean, my mother and father divorced. My mother was 16 when she had me, okay? And
That's
all
rough.
I can remember, when I look
That's
back, well, and then I lost my mom from divorce. I went with my grandmother, and that was at the age of 10. But all I can remember back then is seeing my parents drive to the beach the back way, 110, beer cans on the dashboard and smoking butts while we were standing on the back seat, 3 of us. That's all I can remember of that life. But I've been married and with the same woman for over 50 years, around 53 years.
And that's quite an accomplishment, by the way.
Well, I'll say this, though. The first 40 years, first 40 years, I'm going to try to make this a short story, but the first 40 years, I had a ton of baggage. And my wife married a man with baggage. I don't know why she did, but she did that. And now, the last 10, I'll give myself a little bit more, maybe 24, because my granddaughter is doing so great, the oldest one. And I know I was a big part of that. Always stressing STEM, go toward that. Civil engineer, got a great job with the DOT now, all that type of stuff. But that's what I'm most proud of. But the first 40 years, I would say, I wasn't a good husband.
So, Bob,
Not at all.
Bob,
Listen, I worked 2.
Remember.
Yeah.
So we wanted to go up so that, because, I mean, we were doing stuff, so we waited for the train.
There we go.
So sorry that we're off and on the air, losing Wi-Fi and some connections. Could be because the OVU.
No, the system's crashing. It's Christmas time. People, it's all right.
A lot of usage on there.
That's what I was going to say, exactly.
My guess is it's Christmas week. A lot of people take the day off, so they have the underlings running the operation. and
It
they
could be
don't-
people have taken vacations.
Well, that's a good point, yeah.
But we were talking about different vacations.
We're going
and
to talk about
things.
the schedule when Evelyn's done her point.
We were talking about different vacations that we had, and Bob had mentioned Pikes Peak, and I've told this story before, that we had a conference that was in Denver, and we always take a few extra days to have like a vacation. We went to Pikes Peak, which is what you had talked about.
What state is Pikes Peak in?
Colorado. But when you get to Pikes Peak, if there were dotted lines or straight lines, I mean, you can see the other states around it. That's how high it is, and you get lightheaded. You get lightheaded in Denver, but you get even more lightheaded in
What,
Pikes
maybe
Peak.
it was about 5,000 feet above sea level?
At least we
Yeah.
can look it up if we need to. But my point was is that we were waiting for the train, and there are different buildings that are there, places you can eat, the bathrooms, a few stores. And there was this noise, and I said to Glenn, "What is that?" So I tried to focus on it. There were geraniums and all kinds of beautiful flowers everywhere. These were hummingbirds. So in our age bracket, there was an adult, we call it an adult cartoon yesterday. Today, it's a cartoon. The Jetsons. And the noise that their machines make that's on the animated cartoon is exactly the noise that was being made by the wings of these hummingbirds, because there were so many of them. There were hundreds of them. But that sound, I said to Glenn, geez, sounds like we're in the Jetsons movie. So, I just wanted to share that. So you were going to say something.
How many of our viewers know what the Jetsons are?
Yeah, that and the Flintstones.
Right.
Oh, our viewers know. The kids.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so Evelyn, speaking of the schedule, we talked about this the other day on the I believe, maybe we texted, maybe we talked.
No, we talked yesterday.
Okay, so, next week is the 26th, and you said no live show.
Right, because
Okay, then that's fine. Just wanted to let everybody.
Because of Christmas
Sam and
week-
Bob know there's no live show. Then the week after, the 2nd of January in 2025, what are we doing that day?
I think I'm going to leave it up to my co-hosts if they want to come in on that Thursday.
Oh, this is a day after New Year's Day?
Yeah, because I will have to, I'm not going to give all my plans live on television, that's for sure, but
We don't want them.
I understand that. So
Everyone goes to different nudist colonies around New
oh
England.
yeah, right,
this
would
time
that
of
be,
year.
Glenn would love that. Anyway, we can figure that out.
She didn't say she's not doing it.
Yeah, look, I could always come in on the second, though, to run a show if you wanted to do that and bring someone in. I can always find someone.
I
to do
don't,
that.
I guess I'll be okay on the 2nd. I can check with my wife, but I don't.
And I can bring
think-
Glenn in.
I don't think we have
Maybe.
But
anything.
no show next week?
But
No
no
show
show
after
on the
Christmas.
26th? Okay.
And then we'll just start fresh on January 2nd.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to put no show on the 26th. All right, we cleared that up. And we're going to have a show on the 2nd. Thank
Okay.
you.
Because there are other shows out there. We're only talking about what the Thursday one is.
Everybody's got a clicker. They can change the channel anytime they want.
Oh,
That's my
Right.
wife. and-
so
All
you've
right.
been busy, huh?
Yeah.
So I mentioned something about politics. I mean, if we want to keep talking about family life and whatever comes to mind, that's great. There's different things that's out there currently with who is really running the country. When I take a
question.
look, that's true. When I take a look at different things that's happening, the question is Biden really running the country, or is there some other group? Or is it being run by the inmates, as the saying goes, or does the bureaucracy, it's so extensive that it really doesn't necessarily need a leader in order to maintain whatever the status quo is, or to run amok?
I'd like to make a comment on that, which I think is very important. The people need to hear this. About 2 weeks ago, on my show, I have a cable show in Chelmsford, And my guest was Simon Cataldo, who is one of our 3 state representatives for Chelmsford. And Simon is a young man, he's 38 years old, tremendous background, tremendous amount of integrity. But I would call him, from a political standpoint, I would say that I would call him a mildly progressive Democrat. He's not a lunatic progressive Democrat, but he's somewhat left of center. And before we went on the show, of course, we have our topics mapped out beforehand, but he said, do you want to talk about the presidential pardon, where Biden pardoned his son, Hunter Biden? And I said, well, I hadn't thought about it. I said, but if you'd like to make some comments about it, I said, that would be fine. And I said, maybe we can do that in conjunction with your thoughts on the election, okay? So we got about halfway through the show, and then we got to that point. And Simon Cataldo, a Democrat, this is very important, a Democrat said, and the question was, what happened? Why did the Democrats lose so badly in this past election? And he said, for an entire year, he said, the Democratic Party gaslit, and that was his word, gaslit the American public about the president's mental status.
Explain gaslit.
Gaslight means, basically it's lie, okay? They lied to us, okay? So he said they gaslit, and of course I couldn't resist. I jumped in and I said, well, Simon, I would argue that it's been more than a year. I said, but go ahead, okay? And he went through that whole process. He said it was clear. He said a year ago, he said it was totally clear what was going on with Biden. He said, and you had members of the administration telling people that what they were seeing with their own eyes wasn't true. They were calling out cheap fakes for, they were saying that it was a conspiracy on the other side, on the Republican side. And basically, this young Democrat went up one side and down the other. And of course, he's 100% right. I mean, anybody with eyes could see what was going on, all right? And he said, and then you had the presidential pardon. He said, he made it worse when he did that. For a whole year, he and his staff and his press secretary almost defiantly would state, no pardon, and then he does that. So this is from a young, progressive Democrat. And this is why I like Simon Cataldo.
Speaking of his lame duck leader.
Well, but it doesn't matter. I think if he would, you got to know this guy.
He came to the
Simon has
When his boys get a little bit old.
huge amounts of integrity. Okay, so Simon and I don't agree on much politically, okay? But I vote for him anyway because he's an honest guy and he has the ability to be objective in things like this. Now, the comments he made, now it's just my little 2-bit show, which 35 people watch, so whatever he said on my show...
Are you on Facebook?
Yes. Probably isn't...
It is the truth.
Probably isn't going to get much traction.
Do you watch your views?
But I told him, I said, so now I'm going to put you in the same category as Seth Moulton. I said, because, you guys that are speaking out like this, you're going to get an awful lot of grief from your party. And he said, I don't care. He said, the truth is the truth. He said, if we continue to gaslight the American public, he said, we're going to be in the wilderness. I mean, we're going to keep losing elections.
Well, they're doing it right now with the drones, right?
Yeah. Well,
I wish Glenn was here because
again, I mean, I don't know much about it, but what I do know is,
well, why don't we know?
How can you look me in the face and say, we assure you that it isn't a threat, but we don't know where they're coming from?
So there's a...
That's a complete non sequitur, okay? Right. It doesn't follow.
Right.
But there's a couple of pieces here.
Ridiculous.
So as you're listening to all of the commentary on it, because it's the same stuff over and over, hour after hour, day after day. All they have to do is identify or show pictures or any number of things, and that would be worth more than any of the words that they would be stating. But if there's any kind of security issue with whatever the government may or may not be doing, they can't talk about it. So they're they're beating around the bush.
They know
They just-
they know exactly what these things are. They're
Well,
just
to
not
a
gonna-
certain
they're
extent,
not
I
gonna
would
tell
say
us.
yes.
They're not
But
gonna tell
considering
us.
the balloon that went over, and they said that there's nothing to see here, folks, move along. And it was interesting because as soon as this came out, that's what I said to Glenn, and then all of a sudden, all over the news is everybody's talking about the balloon. I said, well, I guess either age or intellect has something to do with the observation. But as far as the drones go, if they really want to, if it was something else, all they have to do, and they have the technology to go up and get one.
Right.
And they're very large, and they wondered whether or not, that some of them are actually airplanes or helicopters or whatever. But my sister said that they were, she's in Florida, she said she could see them out over Fort Myers. And then they talked about it. But once you put it out there, it's kind of like UFOs, then everybody sees them. People are looking for them. And it's one of those things we'll just have to wait and see. And when Trump was asked the question, and Glenn and I were having the conversation, the conclusion is, yeah, he was briefed, but he can't talk about it because apparently it's a security issue.
He did say, though, because I watched his press conference, he did say that they know what they are. He did say that. But you're right, beyond that, he wouldn't comment. So I think he's got,
And he wouldn't even
Bobby's turn to read 3.
he's been told.
Merry Christmas to you.
On the mic,
and-
Bobby.
Merry Christmas to you and yours.
Who's that from, do we know?
That's from Dave Melanson.
Oh,
Biden and his administration destroyed this country with big government ending and open borders. And the lies that came out that human vegetable's mouth drained the swamp. How about the $16 million payout from ABC and George Snuffleupagus? That was interesting. You had the progressive Democrats that were on Facebook that was saying that freedom of the press, they're being sued for that, but they were telling lies, among other things, and so that's what happened there, and they settled that because they would have lost. I'm certainly sure they were advised of that piece.
well, and the other thing you have to, yes, and I agree with you, and what you have to understand about defamation in a legal sense is that people like Trump legally are considered public figures, so the threshold to attain the defamation standard is a lot higher for a guy like Trump than it would be for an average citizen. So if the determination was that defamation occurred against a public figure, that is a very, very high legal hurdle to cross, and that's why that is so significant. Okay, because the First Amendment basically says if you're a public figure, you're fair game. People can say anything they want about you. So when you're a public figure and it crosses over into defamation, the standard has to be that the person committing the defamation had to know that what he was saying was not truthful. That's the standard, or should have known based on the evidence available. So really what that says is Stephanopoulos knew that what he was saying wasn't true. That's what that says.
Well, that might not be true, Sam. They read the teleprompter quite often.
and they write it.
And
But that's-
just watching Channel 5 News over the last week, okay?
But John,
Well,
yeah,
we're looking at an overturned
yeah.
18-wheeler. And she says, there's a box truck that got overturned on 128. And they're like, sweetheart, that's not a box.
It's not a box truck, right?
But she's reading the script, and you read the script, or you're gone by lunchtime. If you don't want to read the script,
Well, I
you
agree
do
with
not
you.
read the script, you're gone.
Yeah, I agree with you, but in this case, if you watch the interview, the Stephanopoulos interview with the congressperson, he departed from the teleprompter, and he said it several times in different contexts. So I think that, to me, indicates that he knew what he was saying.
I'm not sticking up for the guy, I'm just
Yeah.
telling you how media works. For
No, I understand, and I agree with you. I mean, and if you don't follow what your bosses want you to do, yeah, I think you're right. You're gone. You're fired. But in this, I thought that was very, very significant. And of course, the spin is that, well, really Trump is still guilty and Stephanopoulos didn't do anything wrong. You know, the network just didn't want a protracted lawsuit, so they paid out. I think it goes further than that. All right.
You
It
know
goes
what I'm
further than
sensing,
that.
Sam? I don't
Yes.
know if you and Evelyn feel the same way, but what I've been seeing lately, and I've talked about it a lot on the Tuesday show. I do 2 days a week, Tuesday and Thursdays, and I come here to get an education. I always say that, and I really do. I've talked a lot about one of the big issues in this country will be unions. And I think, you know, and I'm a Trumper, no doubt about it. I've been a Trumper for quite a while. But now that they're all down in Florida visiting Trump, like the leader of Amazon, which is, they got problems right now, like with the Teamsters,
Yep.
10,000 Teamsters have come out and
Yep.
supported, you know, their rights to have a union. And Amazon only has a little over 1 million employees. So I believe it's not going to be just about regulations in Florida. I think there's a movement. I was a 20-year prison guard. I know what it is to be in a union. I think there's a big movement by the big money people to get rid of unions. They're going to, and I've
Oh,
been
they
saying
always
it.
wanted to.
Yeah. Right,
That's
right.
not anything
Evelyn,
new.
can you read this one?
The disgusting news should be held accountable for their actions. They went along with the lies. That way, pretty much everybody would be out of business.
But like teachers' unions, a lot of unions that look at the post office, they're talking about privatizing. I would recommend it, and now they're talking about shutting down government. I really don't know what happens when the government shuts down. I don't. I know we'd shut it down before, but
There's a few things, and everything is online, so if anybody wants to know those details, but when we talk about the thing with the unions, we can also talk about contracts. One of the things that's currently occurring, and you know, we'll see what your perspective is that I can see, is that Biden and whoever it is that hates Trump and wants to try to make it very difficult or impossible for him to achieve things. They're passing executive orders. They're having contracts with new hires, with golden parachutes. They're doing all kinds of things so that when Trump comes on, if there was any kind of efficiency that he was trying to achieve or his policies that he wanted to implement, they're going to make it as hard as possible as he can. They're spending money. It's our money that they're spending, and I don't think they give a care.
They don't.
To be careful what I say on
They don't
camera. Because I do get a little bit passionate about this, because when we were on this, or when I was on the school committee, when you were on the board of selectmen, you're on the school committee, we know that the money that we're spending is your money, and we want to make sure that it's almost like our money. We don't want to spend any more than we have to on whatever, and we want the best bang for our buck, and that's not happening currently at the federal level. For the president,
And it
the
hasn't,
current
and it
president,
hasn't since the 1930s.
well,
okay?
I have
Right.
negative things as well as the positives about many of the different
So-
presidents. But you now have Biden that wants to get rid of all of the steel that's sitting on the Texas border with Mexico. And that's to get rid of it, so it's going to be even more difficult for Trump to do that. To me, it doesn't show that those individuals that are doing this, regardless of title, how long they've been there, what they may have contributed to the country before, or whatever your opinion is, if they're trying to do that now, they're not working for you. They're working for
Now,
them.
let me ask you this. Okay, the story on the border material is the steel that is supposed to be used in the construction of the wall. So the story is that the government is now auctioning off that material, and they'll accept bids as low as 5 cents on the dollar. Okay, so that's what's been reported. Now, I've seen that reported in 2 outlets. I have not seen that reported on the major media. I have not seen that reported on ABC, NBC, or CBS. Have you seen that reported on the major networks?
I don't watch those
They're
networks.
being told not to report it.
That's like everything
Have you
else.
seen it, John?
I have seen it on Fox
You've
News.
seen it on
I've
Fox?
seen it on Fox, but nobody
Yeah.
else is covering it.
Well, that's what I'm talking
It's not
about.
on their teleprompter.
That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so it's a story that's going on. So I've seen it on Fox, and I read about it in the National Review. Okay, so those are the 2 places I've seen it. I have not seen it anywhere else.
Can you take this one, Sam?
Like Senator Shea said yesterday, it's free money. What does that mean? It's free money. What does that mean?
What's the context?
Yeah,
I don't-
Is there some kind of a link you can send us? We'd like to take a look at that, please.
yeah. It's
Um,
free money.
Well, it's almost when we go to town meeting in Chelmsford, and they talk about free cash. It
Oh.
isn't free.
I hate that term.
It-
I absolutely
It
hate
isn't
that
free.
term. As an
It's what's
accountant,
left
I hate
over.
that term.
It's not really free, it's your money.
Free to spend
Well, it is
on
free to
anything you want.
Right, but we also need a certain percentage of people.
Free
Why not
cash.
give it back?
Yeah, free cash.
Sometimes you do, and sometimes you put it in.
Sometimes, can you just name?
Because when you take
We've
a
done that. We've
small
done that
amount of
in
money to
Chelmsford.
give it back,
Yeah.
it may cost you more to write the check and buy the envelope of paper and put a stamp on it than it is for the money that you're receiving. So it costs the taxpayers money to get that small amount of money
Well,
back.
to John's point, in the last 25 years, okay, the town of Chelmsford has probably put some free cash back on the tax rate maybe 5 or 6 times in the last 20 years.
Meaning, back on the tax rate, meaning what? They took.
Meaning, so let's say we have $3 million in free cash. So instead of taking the $3 million and putting it in a stabilization fund or spending it on something, let's say they took half of that and they put it back on the tax rate to lower your property taxes, okay? So the town has done that. We did it once when I was on the select board. And I know when I was on FinCom before, they did it once, and we've done it 2 or 3 times since then. The problem with that is, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, but when you do it, the following year, you're going to have a bigger deficit or a bigger hole. That's the problem when you put the money back. But a town or a city can do that. They can take their operating surplus and they can decide that for the coming year, they're going to take some of that money and they're going to put it back on the tax rate, which means that the residents will have a smaller tax bill. That is always an option with free cash. You can do that.
Right, but even though I like the idea of doing that, my approach is if you have it, it's one-time money. And if we have projects in capital,
Yeah.
we have some other things, one-time money, take some of that money and get that off the list.
That's
That way,
the
then
right way
that
to-
way
yeah.
in the future, your capital budget
That's-
could be less, or you're going to get more
That's the right way.
done.
That's the right way to do it.
Because that's what you should be doing, like with your house. And
Now, that's what we did with, that's,
Okay, now what, at the break?
anytime, how do you feel? You want to talk about Christmas?
Anytime, it's your
Just-
boss. What do you want?
Why don't we have Paul Cohen is with us, and we can have him
Yes.
join us for the last 7 minutes of the Dawn Patrol, and then we'll start fresh at 7 a.m.
I'll move. I'll move to Sam.
You're gonna
right
sit
there,
here.
Sam, and I'll go in the lawn.
you're
Stay
go-
right there, buddy, right here. Stay next to him.
no, I'm on the end.
You're here, you're here.
Just an excuse to get a cup of coffee.
All right, we're gonna go to a quick break. We'll be right back. Thanks.
There we go.
Well, welcome back from our break. We have about 5 minutes before we have another break at the 7 o'clock mark.
Can't have too
And-
many breaks.
Yeah, you can't have too many. Paul Cohen, who is the Chelmsford Town Manager, has joined us. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. We'll talk about all kinds of stuff related to Chelmsford at 7 o'clock. We were talking about politics, but earlier on, which covered quite a bit of the show, we were talking about Christmas, we're talking about upbringing, we're talking about all kinds of stuff. So how do you celebrate the holiday? Everybody has traditions, and you have a family. So maybe when you were little, how did you do it? Have you changed anything that you've done? Because obviously you get married and you do things that your wife may want to do.
Christmas is always a special time in my family. It's just sort of what my parents brought into the household. I think, it is different when you're married and you have your own family because you're sort of taking in your wife's customs and so forth, and it's just different. I mean, you're there with your siblings when you're young and so forth, and it was, and I was sort of the third of 4 children, so you were sort of growing up in what was ahead of you. It was funny. What my parents did, because we were 4 kids, we were always hyperactive. So, believe it or not, my dad's activity was on Christmas Eve he would take us to Bill and Andy's in Chelmsford, which is many are familiar with. There was a service station. It was
The old bike store.
The old bike store and toy store. And then the goal was we would all go there and get to pick out our own Christmas gift, meaning
Wow.
toy. And the idea was, from my parents' perspective, is we would then go home, and then that would keep us occupied and calm and focused. And then you would then go off to bed, and then Santa would come overnight and so forth. And in my house, probably because there were 4 of us and so forth, Santa didn't wrap his presents. You got piles. You had, one child here, the next one was there. So, because you had all these images that, gifts would come, and they were unwrapped, but the gifts from Santa. And then Christmas Day was always to go see my mother's mother, which is my grandmother, obviously, and that was the extended family because my mother came from children of one of 12. And then my dad wasn't raised in the Christian religion, so that was sort of the focus on Christmas Day. So that was sort of the smart thing. And I know my brother, what he would do when his kids were young is they would always go to the movies on Christmas Eve. So there was always the idea of, like, what can you do, because the kids are hyperactive on Christmas Eve because you're so excited and geared up for Christmas. And so again, in the case of my parents, it was always, well, we'll go to Bill and Andy's, pick out the toy that you want. And then that way you came home and you were focused and you were sort of calmer than you would otherwise be, geared up. And then again, other people I know go to the movies on Christmas Eve and other things to make it.
Some people go to church.
It
was always church on Christmas morning. Although a few times when I got older, like in my teens, when I was driving, I would go with my mother to midnight mass. But St. Margaret's rarely did a midnight mass.
We
back
always
then.
did midnight mass,
But
too,
so I
yeah.
think we would go to St. Peter's, I believe, was where we would go to midnight mass. But that was always an exciting part. But again, at that point, I'm well in my teens and I'm driving and so forth. So midnight mass was exciting. But then the problem at that point is when you're older, your parents are older, so that only lasts so long because they don't want to go out that late.
We're going
that's
to
true.
break
What
at
do you
6:59:30. Evelyn, you got 2 texts to read, please.
Mr. Biden has a lot of hate towards the people in his own party also. He will never forgive the higher-ups in the Democratic Party for pushing him out.
I agree with that.
And I think everybody agrees with
I
that.
think we understand that.
It doesn't matter what the context was, it's free money. The fact that an elected official is treating our hard-earned money as free to them was appalling.
All right, I get it. I understand now. All right, that's the context. Yep.
The government shut down yet? No?
No.
Okay.
One can only hope.
But there was some interesting advice with regard to that, and that was, pass whatever you can without the spending. And you now have Elon Musk and Ramaswamy reading what the bills are and then telling everybody what's in there. And you even had members of Congress that didn't know that there was a raise in there. They didn't know some of the other details. And now you've got this ad hoc committee that's telling them what's in the bills that they're passing.
No, it happens at the State House, too.
But they forget to tell you they're
They
building
have no idea what they're voting
Yeah.
on half the time.
So we have a few
Right.
seconds left in
Right,
this first
right.
hour, and stay with us for the second hour for City Life. And John is going to break, and then we will resume shortly after 7 as a transition.
Sounds good. You guys are up.
Welcome back to City Life. I'm Evelyn Thoren. I am your host for the next approximate hour. My co-hosts Sam Chase and Bob Hoey. Nice to see you guys super early. We already have done Dawn Patrol from 6 to 7 a.m., talked about all kinds of stuff. And we have Chelmsford Town Manager Paul Cohen that has joined us. Thank you very much again, Paul, for coming in so we can talk a little bit more at year-end, calendar year-end, versus fiscal year-end items that may be important in Chelmsford. We'll digress a little bit
Before you
during...
get started, while I think of it, okay, I have to leave early,
Oh, wow.
okay, because I have an assessors meeting at 8 o'clock.
Who scheduled that?
I don't know. No, I do know who scheduled that. You know, we have a lot of things, administrative stuff we have to go over, so,
You're
you know,
leaving around 7:30?
I can blame the town manager because he appoints the assessors, so
Right,
it's your
exactly.
fault.
Right,
But
exactly.
So we may digress a little bit
I have to leave- I have
during
to
the
leave
show from
early.
what is Chelmsford
Yep.
to maybe what is holiday traditions or any number of things.
When I seen Paul was here today, I said, what are you going to ask him? I have one question, because I remember Jay Lang saying that I believe it's 2025, we're going to be hurting for money and we
Yes.
better keep our eyes open.
Yes.
And I worry about schools, Lowell, Chelmsford, anywhere, schools. But what do you feel? How's it looking?
Not good. I mean, we had a meeting, a week and a half ago.
Tri-board, right.
Tri-board, meaning the Select Board, Finance Committee, and School Committee to discuss the upcoming budget. And we are basically going to be reducing services in the year ahead. We cannot afford, under the Proposition 2.5 tax levy, level service operations. And the reason for that is quite simple, one word, inflation. The town of Chelmsford receives 76% of its revenue from the property tax. And as we all know, the property tax has a regulator of 2.5%, hence the name Proposition 2.5. And the problem is Proposition 2.5 or 2.5% increase doesn't work when inflation is running significantly above 2.5%. So what's hurting us is things that are really outside of the control of normal government discretionary operations, meaning our pension assessment is up 8% from the county retirement system. Our health insurance premiums are going up 10%. We also have to pay labor, and as people know, the labor market is very tight, and as evidenced by the recent school settlements and contract settlements in other communities, those agreements are coming in above 2.5% as well. So the math doesn't work. And that was the purpose of the discussion at the tri-board, budgetary meeting was, look, folks, this is not business as usual. We cannot just maintain level service operations. And so we're looking at a deficit of probably about 2.5% of the total budget. Our budget's about $168 million. So if you just took an initial progression of an outlook of, well, if you take away what have to fund, like your debt service, your retirement assessment, your health insurance benefits, and so forth, and then you look at what's left for discretionary departmental operations, the school department's budget is twice the size of the general government, meaning police, fire, highway. Mm-hmm. So if you were to take what was left over with the available projected revenue and allocate it proportionally 2-to-1, then the schools would be looking at roughly $1.8 million in cuts in the town, about $900,000. And that is unsettling because you can't just sort of cut expenses and trim, around the edges to balance the budget. So that was sort of the gist of the discussion. Unfortunately, the discussion then waded into, well, is the allocation fair? That sort of caught me off guard because I was looking for an initial benchmark so that we could come back and say, well, what would be the result of that level of funding shortfall? And that's sort of how the meeting ended up, and so what's going to happen in the weeks ahead, I'm required to produce a balanced budget under the town charter by the end of January, and so I'll be meeting with the superintendent in the weeks ahead to sort of navigate our way through this. But in any scenario, there will be, reduction in services, even though people will be paying more in taxes because of the 2.5% rate increase in the property tax.
So how much did you say that the schools will have to decrease their budget by?
The discussion the other night was 1.8 million.
1.8. Let me ask a question, so just a clarifying point. So when we're talking about, you've given some real numbers here, and you said the school, projected the school will have to reduce their budget by 1.8%. Does that, 1.8 million. Does that mean 1.8 million off the fiscal
No.
25 budget?
No.
Or does that mean, or are you really talking about the rate of increase?
The rate of increase.
All right, like I
So
said, to me, that's a very,
their budget would still go
salient
up. Their
point.
budget would still increase by almost 2.25%.
that's the point I'm
I think
trying to
that
make.
was but the problem is if what would they have to cut in order to balance the budget growth to what they would have?
So
under
in
their
order for them,
service?
and I don't mean to pick on the school, because the same thing is true on the town side,
yeah.
all right? But, so in order for the school to continue to provide every single service that they currently provide, their budget would have to increase by the number that they gave,
Which was roughly over 4%.
which was
right.
about 4%. And,
Yeah.
but what you're saying is, essentially, the discussion is, well, Jay, you can't increase 4%, you can only increase 2%. Really?
Yeah, roughly, yeah, roughly, yeah,
That's
roughly.
really what we're
Right.
talking about. So we're not talking about cutting the budget to a number below what they are spending in the current fiscal
Right.
year. And I think that's important for people to understand.
Sam, a timely
Okay.
text, would you read this one?
Yes, on both sides, there's always pork,
I mean, the general government and the school
I
department?
guess.
No, and I heard everything you said, and I always feel like
Yeah.
that's the best part of Chelmsford, because of the connection between you and Jay Lang. I mean, he was talking about this a year and a half to 2 years ago,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
we better prepare.
Well,
for
so
this.
was Paul.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
and then the other thing is, in the horizon, in 2 years, less than 2 years now, we expect to be going to ask the voters for funding to increase the property tax significantly to fund a new middle school.
Middle school, right.
So, again, there's only so much you can ask of the taxpayer.
And we just did the fire
We
station.
just did that for the
Which,
fire station.
yeah,
Right.
and didn't that
Excuse me.
surprise you that they
Yeah.
approved?
Yes, that surprised me.
Yes.
That
Yeah,
surprised
I
me.
was very surprised.
I was too.
But
What scares me the most about this whole issue is in Lowell, but roughly 255 million for the school budget. And the biggest part of the budget's special education.
And
So-
same in Chelmsford and other
Is-
towns.
is it?
But the big challenge, Bob, in that is Lowell's not at the Proposition 2.5 levy limit because you've
Right.
got excess capacity. But the real limit is how much more can you ask people to pay in property tax?
Right.
I mean, can the city really come back and ask for another 5 or 7% tax increase? I think the answer is probably no.
People had enough
Paul,
already.
Exactly.
a question I'd like to ask
Yes.
is, at what point do you delete a position? Now, at one time,
Yes.
the town of Chelmsford had somebody their job was to fill the horse troughs with water. At one time, that was
Yes.
their job.
Yes. Well, I don't know that
And
they actually
I'm-
did, but yes, I get the idea.
This would be a good time to get rid of that position if
Right.
it still exists.
He's
How do
he's
you-
already done that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm asking.
He's gonna ask a
I'm
different
asking the manager.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a question here. I know it.
What process do you have, Paul, to alleviate the horse trough fillers? So when somebody retires, do you take a look, okay, well, what did they actually do? What was their job description? Now's the time to, okay, well, Mary, you did Bill, you did a great job. Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Good luck. Goodbye. Good luck. God bless.
Yeah.
And you just delete
Don't
the
fill it.
position.
Yeah.
Well, you don't, but the habit is, you don't fill it, but you leave the position there.
No,
What do you do?
what we do is, what we do in realistic terms is, here's what will really happen and what has happened. You look at what you can fund in the upcoming budget in 6 months, because again, I'm preparing a budget in January for July, and if you can't afford it, you not only eliminate the position from the budget, but you also let the person go out the door that day, because you don't want somebody hanging around who's on a run out of their contract, because you can imagine the atmosphere and the mindset of that person as well as the people around them that.
Well, retirees know, hey, I'm retiring
Right,
this year. I'm done.
right.
You might not.
But
know.
retirees usually don't retire at the end of the fiscal year unless it's a school teacher.
Right.
Police officers, firefighter, highway people, they
all during the
retire
year.
throughout the year. Usually when they hit either their age, criteria for retirement or their work anniversary for retirement, i.e. in the retirement system, that's usually the trigger for when they leave. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll look at all the departments and say, oh, okay, well, you could probably do it in the police or fire where there's more employees. You could say, hey, we expect that Sally is going to retire as a
Well, you got
firefighter.
DPW, you got all
And
these
then
different
you would basically
departments.
say, we're not going to fill the position when that person retires. Now, the only one who has mandatory retirement are police and fire in the state, because they have to retire at 65. But for highway, you don't know when the person's going to choose to leave. So oftentimes, you'll either have that discussion with the department head saying, hey, as Sally said when she's planning on retiring, if not, then you've got to cut the position. So yeah, no, you will cut positions in real time, but again, it won't happen just 6 months from when you do the budget. You'll basically let that person go out the door with the release of the budget, because you don't want somebody, employed by you who's, you wouldn't want somebody, and nobody wants somebody working for them saying, oh, gee, in 2 months you're going to be unemployed, because obviously their mindset isn't there, and
You've already lost them.
you've already lost them.
Right.
Exactly.
I understand, thank
Yeah,
you.
So, yeah,
generally
no.
speaking, that's how that goes. I've already experienced how you cut the school budget.
In Lowell, as soon as they find out Sally's retiring, there's a line from the funeral home
Yeah.
to City Hall for that job.
Yeah.
They don't eliminate any jobs.
Well, they may not have any choice. I mean, I don't know.
this-
Here's the problem. They said the constraint of the property tax, but we don't think the state aid's going to be there, and
Nope.
the state's not going to be able to backfill us.
Nope.
Because they've got issues with the MBTA, and
Well, you also
and a lot of the
have-
state budget is based on benefits, too.
You also have the
Medicare.
mindset down in Boston that Trump's coming in, the world's going to end.
Well, I think what we do know, regardless of Trump coming in, is the federal money was going to end, because they just can't afford to fund, all the opera money and all the, the, as they call it, the inflation, act monies is all gone. And so so the money's not coming from Washington, and we don't think it's coming from the State House. And there's very little you can raise at the local level beyond the property tax. Because the state restricts everybody. I mean, we can't impose a local income tax. We can't even raise the meals tax. We can't do anything without state approval.
This affects all cities and towns.
All cities and
All
towns.
cities and towns.
Inflation's that's the difference, is when we had the worst economic period, our experience, which was the 2008 recession, that was a recession. Meaning everybody was hurting, people were fearful of maintaining their homes, they couldn't sell because the house value had depreciated, people were, unemployment was higher. There, basically, it was a different mindset, meaning people took 0% salary increases.
And you cut
We
a lot of
made- we made
positions.
cuts.
You made it,
Positions.
you cut a lot of
Cut
positions.
positions.
Yep.
But there was a collective mindset. The problem with the inflationary environment, where there's a labor shortage and you're dealing with inflation, is people are mobile, and so therefore if the person isn't earning an appropriate salary as a teacher or firefighter or whatever, they're just going to jump to another community where there is, because of the labor shortage, where there are positions available. And the other problem is your other costs of services are running high as well. Whether you contract out or everything else, it's just a different mindset and a different experience than I think this generation of employees has ever seen. We have a generation of employees who've not seen a recession.
That's right.
And people are more mobile now, they're less connected, there's also less media coverage of what's going on in cities and towns. And therefore, you just have a lesser sense of collective understanding and commitment. And so it's going to be a very challenging period. Again, not just for Chelmsford. We saw this last year in Westford. They tried an override. It failed. They're not even going to try an override. We saw the cuts in Drake that experienced, and it's going to happen everywhere, because
And the override fail in Westford was somewhat shocking. People were very surprised. I mean, Westford's a relatively wealthy community.
Yeah.
It's not a Wellesley, but it's a lot richer than Chelmsford, for example.
And they get
failed.
more Chapter 70
Yeah,
money.
people were very surprised when that failed.
and they're not even going to ask for one this
Nope.
year, is my understanding.
Nope.
And in places where it did pass, like in Acton, and it really just squeaked by.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
Acton.
again, what do you do now?
Well, I was somewhat surprised during the tri-board meeting when there were a couple of the school committee members were pretty adamant about the fact that we should be asking for an operational override.
Listening to him, it sounds
I
like you
don't-
got to cut. You got to
You've got
cut
to cut.
positions.
You've got to cut, and I just don't
Yes.
see how, but the problem is the demand and requirement for services doesn't go away. As I was saying, at the meeting, even if you cut the budget, I still have to assess every property in town. We still have to issue property tax bills, collect, we still got to pay our bills. You still got to respond to potholes. You still got to educate special education students and regular education students. You still have to respond to fires and police. So yes, you can cut, but the problem is the demand for services doesn't go away. So it's not like in a private sector, you can say, oh, we're going to phase out the Buick line of the General Motors vehicles, so we're going to shut down those factories and we're going to not produce those vehicles. You still have the same underlying demand for services regardless of your funding level. And that's where it gets uncomfortable for folks, because then it becomes the issue. And you remember, Evelyn, years ago was the idea of curriculum coordinators we were talking about, and career explorations and all the, remember all the...
Right, so when I left the school committee, that was the beginning of a more positive financial future, okay, at that point. And it got better. And there was money that came in. There was different things that occurred. We don't need to go into the details. However, in the tenure that I had on the school committee, we were forever trying to figure out how to make the money work. And it wasn't always as cooperative with your predecessor with regard to things.
That's
And
an
we were
understatement.
always negotiating the lowest increases we could with all our unions, because that was part of our budget. What isn't part of our budget, the school department budget, is the medical insurance, which is part of your side of the budget. But if you added that into our side, it's a big number, because we have the most employees in the town.
Sam, you want to make this point from the audience, please?
I think the first word is when.
Yeah.
When you raise the price of fuel in an oil-based society, it has an effect on
Cities,
cities and towns.
Thank you.
Well, yes.
which would be another point that even if the fuel goes down for the usage that you would have in the town, it's not significantly enough that's going to make an impact.
It's not a major part of the town's
No.
budget.
No.
We're not running
No, it's not as if you're some kind of a trucking firm, or
Right,
UPS or
exactly. Yeah.
FedEx.
Our biggest cost is labor. We're a service organization.
Right, and
Right.
to a certain extent, that's the same thing in the school department. But there are a lot of positive things that has happened within the town that we also tried to support when I was there, and that is the capital budget, so that our infrastructure is good, so that there are no crises with regard to the facilities. But when we were trying to figure out how to cut, I always called it the smoke and mirrors, which Sam kind of got involved with, but we didn't detail it enough for people to understand. You present a budget, and the federal government did this, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. You present a budget, and then all of a sudden you got to cut all this stuff. And people are thinking you're cutting the current services, but you're cutting future wish lists and future types of things. So it's in the future budget that you're cutting that budget and not the current budget, which is what you said. So instead of asking for $1 million increase, you have to ask for a $500,000 increase. And then you have to figure out how you're going to distribute that in order to maintain your services. But
But that may not be enough to cover current services, is the point. It may be that you need a 4% increase to
Exactly.
keep everything whole.
Right.
If you only do a 2.5% increase, you may have to cut people.
Right.
Right. So in cutting people, what I saw after I left was you had an increase in personnel that either had direct services to children or didn't in the administration level, and will liberally apply a definition of an administration. The question will be is whether or not, and the superintendent will be on in January, is to say, are you going to cut those people that you put in there after I left? Because that was something that we did without. So we know that you now have another delicate balance within a school department budget, and that's special education, because it's not always predictable. You try to put a number in there, but you don't know what might be coming your way with new students or with your current students that are being evaluated. And you don't want those students to drop through the cracks. You want them educated, you want their needs to be met. And the increase in technology has created even more ways to have needs for students because of identification of behavioral and/or physical issues. So that will impact how they learn. So there's a whole lot of pieces in there. It's very complicated unless you're in the arena knowing exactly what's going on. And that's why we want to have these types of programs that we can put out there so people can at least listen to what your explanation is besides what you do as far as town meeting goes, the Board of Selectmen goes, and then, have some kind of interaction. But to know that we have another financial crisis ahead of us, which is interesting because, again, we're following the sine curve. We're doing the roller coaster again, like we do with enrollment. School department enrollment's going to be up. That's why they want to
And
do.
most importantly, what do we have today?
We have a carrot cake base. There's chopped
vegetables.
almonds. There's chopped almonds in there,
There's some light colored
raisins.
stuff over there too. What else you got now?
Oh, that's an almond. What do you call it? Cheese Danish.
Since Paul doesn't come that much, Paul, we have Ziplocs. So you can take them to go.
Sarah Curlin says that carrot cake is her favorite vegetable.
Well, there's also this pineapple.
Right,
right.
but going to the point, Evelyn, the town, there are reserves in the schools. They have circuit breaker money, which is a full year of circuit breaker money in reserve. They also have a special ed reserve. No one, as you know, under state law, you have a mandate to fund special education services. So that's not where, I don't think, the cuts can't take place there.
I
whether it's
didn't mean to imply that there would
no,
be, but there.
Well, what's going to happen is, as you said, this is, I think, the superintendent's 10th year in the community in Chelmsford. This is Jay's 10th year. And I've been in the community this is my 19th year. So what you can do, look at objectively, and I said this the other night at the tri-board meeting, is you can look at the staffing levels that you had and your enrollment levels, and then see what's changed over that period of time. So by roughly, the student enrollment today is roughly what it was 10 years ago. Okay, clearly the demand for special education services and child support and other is greater because of the pandemic, and also, as you said, there's more skilled areas to assess those services. But what has also changed over that time is some of, as you said, what has sort of not been the classroom-based services, the assistant principals, the communications officer and those other types of positions, library aides and so forth. Those are the kind of things that are really going to be in play, I would think, from the school
Well, they were
side.
before.
And they will, and just like on the town side, we've added positions in facilities and so forth, and in the health department, again, for services. And those are the items that you're going to look at because, as you say, you've got to have that core. When the person dials 911 on the town side or the city side, somebody has to respond to the call, right? Somebody has to answer the call, somebody's got to respond to the call. So that's the core, meaning, people expect that trash is going to be picked up, they expect that their potholes are going to be filled. But the problem on the town side is, as I said earlier, regardless of the budget operations and funding levels, we still have to perform the core operations. We have to pay our bills, we have to assess our properties, we got to collect our taxes, we have to maintain vital records. And so therefore it becomes the discretionary aspects of, gee, do you need this many people in facilities? Can you go with less in the highway crew? Can you, what's the level of human service operations? Do we still have lifeguards at the beach? It's those type of issues that are going to take place, because you can't make the level of funding cuts that are going to be necessary to balance the budget by just sort of saying, oh, we're going to cut some expenses, we're going to, it's going to come down to positions.
Right.
The average person really doesn't realize that, like in the school side, and this has been a few years for me since I watched the budget, or tried to watch the budget, that 87 cents out of every dollar goes towards staff. And then I look at Newton, the first school system. Lowell's been very lucky under the gun. They just settled a contract almost 12% in 3 years.
Yeah.
See, the way I feel now,
Yeah.
I feel that we're going to have to get away from that.
But how are you going to fund it? That's a legal obligation, so you've got to fund it.
No, I know you do, but I'm saying in the future, I think I remember voting 4 and 4. I would do that in a heartbeat because teachers at that time, to me, were really severely underpaid. And now, I don't think Lowell thinks they did a real good job because they gave them almost 12% for 3 years, but position of paras, which we have about 500 of them, I don't believe they got enough money. And we might lose them.
Right.
Once again, Evelyn's homemade baked goodies comes in and steals the show.
That
Looks
might-
delicious.
that
Remember, it's a vegetable. Carrot cake is a vegetable.
Yeah, that might be,
Right, that's the 255 Princeton Street, West Campus. That's built into our revenue estimates. We anticipate there'll be $1 million of property tax growth in the next 2 years due to that. That was based in the forecast, so that's been accounted for. The problem is, there's nothing behind it. Meaning, saying nothing behind it, meaning there isn't further projects down the road that are going to contribute that. And also, if there's 400 apartment units, which is what they're talking about, there's also going to be a demand for town services for those 400 units, whether it's police, fire, and educational services. So we anticipate the first units for that Alexan development at 255 Princeton Street, the West Campus, is going to take place this spring. I think some of the first townhouse units will be occupied in one of the multifamily developments. So that's factored in.
Are there more developments in the queue?
No, that's the problem.
that development at the end of Princeton Boulevard, the old reform school.
Yep, that's the one.
That's what he's
that is.
talking
We're
about.
That
yeah.
thing's incredible.
400 units.
Are there any proposals for Riverneck Road?
There is a 40B process coming in into development at the the one that's been sought for 2 decades at the end of Riverneck Road near the cemetery. The one that was pursued by Princeton Properties for years. That's under another proposal. The one where Mercury Computer was housed, that property's been sold for commercial development, meaning it's not going to be new development. In fact, I expect the assessment on the buildings will probably decrease. Because one is, it's not in grade A or grade B office space. It's really going to be more of a commercial type of facility that has a lesser tax base and so forth. So there's not a lot of development out there. And what you do see for development out there is really residential. But there really isn't anything major in the works right now.
So do you have, we'll deal with this because Sam's still here as far as assessment goes. There's 2 things I want to cover. One is with the new laws and the different regulations and bylaws and stuff that the planning board is working on with regard to almost doubling the residential, because you could add the apartments on there.
Accessory dwelling units.
Yeah, we'll have a town meeting at the end of January on that.
Right, so when you see that, if that occurred, does that mean there's an increase in revenue in the town because of the tax base?
Well, there might be an increase in revenue, but let's think about it. The average home in Chelmsford is assessed for roughly $600,000, just use a round number.
628.
628. What do you expect the assessment would be on a 900 square foot accessory dwelling unit? 200,000 at best? Just talking about, let's talk about it best, because you're already assessing the land that the
land is the
building's
land.
on.
The land is
So
the
that's not
land.
going to increase with the
Right.
accessory dwelling
So,
unit.
900 square foot, 150 to 200,000.
So let's say $200,000.
Yeah.
Well, what's the tax return on the $200,000 assessment? It's roughly, $3,000, not even that, $2,800?
Yes.
So $2,800 would be the revenue that comes in from a accessory dwelling unit. Well,
And at the risk of not sounding alarmist, because people like to talk about these things in alarmist
Yep.
context, I just don't think we're going to see a massive
No.
flurry of people adding ADUs.
No.
And I'll tell you why I say that. We have an awful lot of land in town that is already zoned two-family. As a matter of fact, I live in a two-family zone, and I'm going to tell you that there are people in my neighborhood that have been there for 30 years, and they have no idea that they're living in a two-family zone. And so if you take all of the two-family properties where you already can add a unit as a matter of right, and you look at how many people have actually done that, it's really infinitesimal.
Right.
So I don't know, Paul, would you agree with that?
Yeah,
I mean,
but let's go to the
yeah.
thing. Let's say the accessory dwelling unit gives you $2,600 in tax
Yeah.
revenue. It costs us $18,000 a year to educate a student.
There you go.
Okay? So if, Evelyn, you and your husband were to move into an accessory dwelling unit, because you have no children in the schools, but your 4-bedroom home is now occupied by your children who come in with their kids, you've lost in the long run.
No, I understand.
lost the
That's why we're
the
having a
problem.
discussion.
That's the problem.
lost the benefit,
That's
right.
not the, it's sort of a change of the demographic, because I think most of the people in the accessory dwelling units are going to be family related, right?
Yes.
I don't think Sam is going to want to put an accessory dwelling unit in his property and rent it to a stranger. Now, he may have to, because if his income is tight and he's trying to figure out a financial means of
But he still has to
staying
build
there.
it.
Right, he still has to fund it, but even if him and his wife move into it and they say, we're gonna rent the house for $4,000 a month, well, again, who's likely gonna rent that house is gonna be somebody with a young family that's gonna bring in a couple children into the school system, where we not only have the funding issue, Evelyn, we don't have the space.
No, I
Where are you
understand.
gonna put the
And so
kids?
this is why I wanted to have the discussion. I mean,
Right.
I asked the question knowing what the answers were.
Right, yeah.
But we have to have the discussion.
Right.
Better to have the discussion with you than
Right.
amongst the three of us. The other, I don't know if it's a question or a statement. I was talking to Sam about abatements. You cannot publicize it as you guys in certain terms, but certain information can be out there for the general public, at least in Chelmsford, if not in other communities that may be listening, is that if you are say you're retired, you're on a fixed income, and you're finding it very difficult to meet whatever your expenses are, and the real estate taxes are going up. Depending upon what the numbers would be, hopefully you can work them out, you can apply for an abatement. And
Hardship abatement?
any number of things, and let's say that you didn't do the maintenance on your house. Let's say that even though you think it would be worth an awful lot of money if you sold it, it may not be. And so I have some friends that are real estate agents, and I say, okay, what's the evaluation of my house? I am not in that category, but I want to have a clue to see whether or not I'm going to add any more to it, or I'm just going to leave it the way it is. But you can file for those abatements, regardless of the pride that you may have with the fact that you can pay your bills. Everything that the assessor's office does is confidential, so nobody knows if you are or you aren't unless you tell people. So is there anything, Sam, that, before you leave, that you can comment on that with regard to that? Because again,
Yes.
you can't solicit abatements from what you told me on a legal basis.
Correct. I mean, you can inform the community what's available, but you can't proactively go out and say to a taxpayer, listen, I've looked at your particular financial situation, and I think you might qualify for this. You can't do that, okay? So that's to your point. So you're talking about two different things here. You're talking about abatements of value on your property, and you're also talking about exemptions in terms of what you pay for property tax. So there are two things. If you get your tax bill in January, and you take a look at it, and the assessors say that your property is valued at $700,000, okay, I'm talking residential now, and you say, oh my God, that's way off the mark, that's way too high, you have the legal right to file for an abatement, which means you think your property is valued too high, which means you have a higher tax bill. You file an abatement with the assessor's office. You have a month to do it from the time that you get your tax bill. And it's very simple. You call up the office and you say, I'd like to file an abatement. What do I do? They'll explain it to you. You can actually download a form online, or you can come into the office, whichever, and you can get some direction on how to do it. That's one thing. The second thing is what you were talking about. A taxpayer finds himself in a position where, because of his limited income, he just has a terrible time trying to pay his property tax. That person may qualify for one of several exemptions that are available as a matter of state law that say if you have income limitations, and generally they're also age dependent, if you're over, usually it's 65, you may qualify for one of several different exemptions, which is essentially a credit on your tax bill if you apply, all right? So every year when we send out the tax bills at the end of December, and this would be for the fiscal year coming up, there's a page that goes in the tax bills that explains what I just explained. It tells you what the various exemptions are and how you qualify. So to your point, Evelyn, probably a lot of people don't read that, okay?
Oh, I'm sure they do.
And I'm sure they don't, all right? But it is available, so if you as a taxpayer feel hard-pressed you can't pay your taxes, you think you can't pay, you may qualify, pick up the phone, call the assessor's office, go up on the assessor's website if you have access to a computer, and you can find all kinds of information, and you may qualify. And I think one of the other things that you and I talked about offline was the number of people we have in town. Now, we have, 37,000 residents. We have, and just talking single-family homes now, we have about 10,500 single-family properties in town. You would think that the number of hardship and abatement requests would be a lot higher than they actually are, just based on those numbers. I am continually astounded every year that we don't get significantly more. So to your point, that tells me there are people out there who just, for whatever reason, don't feel that they want to apply because maybe they're embarrassed of whatever the reason. I want to assure those folks it is 100% confidential. All of our actions that we take as a Board of Assessors are covered under executive session. We do document them in minutes, but those minutes are never released to the public. And they only would be under a court order, okay? Because that is 100% confidential information. And it is not shared outside the office. So you should feel very confident that whatever information you give us in terms of your financial situation will be held in the strictest confidence. And I think maybe that might be a reason why some people don't apply.
I think another small reason is like a disabled veteran or a veteran with service-connected disability. Those people can apply for those. I know I could, and I just don't.
And that number is too low, given our veteran population in Chelmsford.
Yeah.
Okay, almost 6,000 people. We don't get the exemption request that
Well, the
we
check
should.
they send us
Yeah.
every month, some of us are happy with that, you know
So,
what I mean?
yeah.
So that's the way I look at that. And before you leave, because maybe you have something to say, I learn a lot through Evelyn and Sam here, okay? Is wastewater, a big issue coming down the road too?
Yeah.
I think in Lowell, I think we have a secret that no one knows about, that a lot of money is going to be coming up.
Well, the problem is we don't have the capacity for the treatment plant, and that's going to affect Lowell and, Chelmsford, Tewksbury, Drake. We are at our capacity, which is why we have this sewer regulation. The plant in Lowell has operated over capacity twice in the last 6 years, and and a lot of that is due to the inflow and infiltration, which is natural when you have an underground system. There's no discussion on how that's going to be expanded because there's no land at Duck Island. And even if you were to expand it, it would take quite an investment financially as well as time in order to increase the sewer capacity. So we're actually exploring other options in Chelmsford, whether we could connect to the MWRA line that's down as close as Burlington. We've approached our neighboring communities like Billerica, and they don't have any excess capacity that they're willing to provide to the town. Sewer is a real constraint. And so that's affecting business growth in Chelmsford, even residential growth in Chelmsford. And I believe it's a hidden and under-discussed issue in Lowell as well. But someday the issue is going to have to be addressed at some point, because there's only so much you can, because the federal government and the state aren't going to allow you to just continue to dispose of the untreated sewer into the river.
Sam's got a skedaddle, so.
Yep.
Can you read this text?
How many rentals? They're all rental units. 396 will all be rental. There's no sale properties at.
And-
Well, it
and-
said
and-
here 6 townhouses are for sale.
I don't know what this.
No.
No,
So-
they're all rental units.
And
So they're all rentals.
and to your point, as far as sewage goes, this
They have
developer
their on-site.
has to put in
They're on site.
an on-site sewage treatment plant because of the capacity restraints.
Right.
So,
All right.
Hey, have a good Christmas,
Thank you very
Sam.
much.
Merry
Take care,
Christmas.
buddy.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for
Thank
the
you.
gift. Merry Christmas.
thank you. You're welcome.
Happy New Year. I'll see you for happy day after.
I hope so, yes. You will not be here on the day after Christmas.
You guys can continue.
Yes, I gathered that. Anyway, thank you, Sam, and we'll be chatting later. We have a number of things going on with regard to that. Now, when we have these accessory dwelling units, okay, and people add on, is there going to be any restrictions with regard to the sewer?
No. Because we allow people today currently to expand their residential homes. And the law is very clear from the state. You cannot impose regulations that would deem the properties for the accessory dwelling units to be uneconomic.
Yeah,
This
put a
is-
leaching field in wood.
Yes, and so the state, so no, that's not going to happen. Again, the new state accessory dwelling unit law becomes effective operationally on February 2nd. Our current bylaw, which is really a in-law apartment bylaw or a limited accessory apartment bylaw, does not comply with the state law. So that's why we're going to go to town meeting at the end of January.
Special town meeting.
Special town meeting, one article just on the accessory dwelling units to amend our bylaw to conform with the new state law and draft state regulations. The purpose of that is twofold. One is to make it clear to the residents what are the regulations and zoning requirements they have to comply with, that, as the state defines it, have to be reasonable. The other component is the building commissioners who are going to receive these applications need to have clear guidance on because otherwise they're going to be challenged. And so that's why we're going to town meeting at the end of January. If we did not go to town meeting, we still would have to implement the state law. And so rather than having vague interpretations and subject to more legal challenges, we are going to amend the bylaw the end of January. What that's going to mean is basically, under the state law, you can put in an accessory dwelling unit on any area of town that's non-commercial or non-industrial, regardless of whether it's a single-family home. So in other words, if you owned a two-family home or a three-family home, you're still allowed by right under the state law an accessory dwelling unit of up to 900 square feet.
That issue was our whole election last
Right,
time.
and
It's
that-
a
but
big issue.
So if-
That's the reality of what's coming at. And what the town can do is you can provide reasonable regulations. And what that really means is, well, what are your regulations today for the main dwelling? What's the setback from the lot line, those type of issues. That's pretty much all you can do. And so they're by right accessory dwelling units. So that's why we're amending our bylaw, because our bylaw wouldn't meet the current standards, because our current bylaw limits it to a family member, that's no longer required. And so basically, it's any unit, it can be attached or detached, as long as it meets the requirements for the current. So for example, in most cases, you would not be allowed to put one in your front property, because right now we don't allow accessory structures in the front of residential dwellings. But if you have an undersized lot, a non-conforming lot, you still would be allowed to put one in, as long as it isn't more non-conforming than what the main principal structure is currently on the property site.
So if you had, you may not be able to do this, but I think of lots of different things. If you had somebody, tear down Sam's house
Yep.
and put up a duplex,
Yep.
could they add the accessory dwelling to
Yes.
the back of that at the
Yes.
same time?
Yes.
Now, if you have a duplex, they can't have one on each side. Is it only a
No,
single,
It's a single for the.
single for a lot?
Yes, for a lot, yes.
Okay, so because the lot would not be divided.
By right. Now, what the state law says is you can apply by special permit for additional accessory dwelling units on a lot. But I think that's a local option, and I don't think, the way it's written now, it's not going to be allowed in Chelmsford. So
Do we have any bylaws or anything in terms of these tiny houses that people can purchase from Amazon?
that would be allowed as well, as long as it's on a foundation,
And only one?
and only one. So
Currently.
Yeah, so people come up with what about modular homes or manufactured homes. What the state says is it has to be on a foundation. So I guess if you bought a modular home, meaning a prefabricated home, that's simple. You come in, you drop it on a foundation, there's your accessory dwelling unit. If you had a mobile home like you see at the mobile home park, we believe that if you brought that unit in and put it on a foundation, that would be allowed. What we don't think you can do is you can't take like a camper, like a mobile home camper, and just
On wheels.
on wheels and bring that in. You'd have to somehow affix it to a foundation.
But it doesn't mean you can't have those in your yard.
Right.
It
So,
just
like-
means that you can't have them classified in that category.
Unoccupied in that category.
Right, but you
Because
can have-
We've had, believe it or not, we've had in the last few months a couple of zoning issues where people were living in mobile mobile homes, meaning like, drivable campers and such, and on the properties connected, and those don't comply with the state law or the town zoning.
So if I have an RV
Yep,
and I move out of my house and I want to live in my RV
Yeah.
on my property
Yeah.
and put my kids, you cannot do
you
that?
cannot do that. The structure has to be on a foundation. Now, if you took the RV and I guess somehow anchored it to a concrete slab or something, I think
Well, that would be
an
the
issue
category,
of-
that would be
Yeah.
the category under the accessory dwellings.
Right,
But
exactly.
is there
no, you-
rules that you cannot live on your
Yes.
own property in a
Yes,
camper?
yes.
All right.
Yeah, you just can't drive in
Wait
and
a
then
second,
drive
that's
out.
the doghouse.
Right, yeah.
You're in the doghouse,
You
you're
can't
in the
do that.
camper.
do
I
that, but-
believe like Elon Musk has like a $7,000 to $10,000 mini home.
Yeah, you can do that. Buy it and drop it in on a foundation, you're all set.
But like if you had a big piece of property like right here next to him, he can only put one.
One. And I think the reason for the anchoring thing, I think it's a safety thing, right? You don't want to have people, you think about it, part of what your structure is, it's also a safe haven. So if you had a severe climate weather issue, like a major windstorm or severe winds, you can't put people in a structure that's unsafe.
Well, it's interesting you say that.
Yeah, that's why the idea of the foundation.
Houses that are over 50 years old
Yeah,
are not anchored to anything. Gravity keeps them on the foundation.
yeah, but they have a foundation. Yeah.
The new houses are anchored to
Right.
the foundation.
Right.
And-
So that's
and-
why they're trying, and that's for safety purposes. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the whole point.
Right,
It's
and
gonna be
a lot of people don't realize too that from one floor to the next, that's also anchored together, because everything is bracketed, which wasn't done
Mm-hmm. Right.
before when we built houses.
Good old gravity.
I'm just,
Right,
get-
but I'm just saying though that there's actual brackets that are on the
When we're going to
supports.
crush depth today, kid, that's crush depth, and most people don't know what the heck we're talking about now.
I understand that, but I'm just saying that the regulations for hurricanes and things like that.
We're a lot
have
smarter than we
increased.
were yesteryear.
Right, I'm just letting people know
well,
that
I
when you
think
go to build, that's
that
extra.
development we were just talking about in Chelmsford up in Princeton Boulevard,
Yep.
I believe you'll fill them.
Oh, yeah.
I see it in Lowell, 2,100, 2,200, 2,400.
At least.
I bet you there would be
It's a
over
luxury
$3,000.
apartment. Yeah, these will be over $3,000, probably approaching $4,000 with some of the luxury.
And the attraction is your school system.
Well,
That's what's gonna
It's
fill.
also a good location.
And
if you're a young
accessibility.
professional. Yeah, you can get to the highways pretty quick. It's a good community, but it's going to
There's
be
a lot of issues.
a lot of issues.
Okay, so you said that there's no developments in the queue currently, except by what we might hear via the rumor mill. There was a question on Facebook, I think there was a question on Facebook, about the piece of property that was cleared on 129.
Yeah.
That well, is a little bit, as you're going out of town, beyond the cemetery on the right. Is there any plans for that, or was
No.
it just cleared and it's just going to lay vacant?
Right now, it's been vacant for, half dozen years.
Yeah,
It's still
yeah.
sitting there vacant. So
Waiting?
there's no plans, yeah. There's nothing planned there. We do have a couple 40Bs in process, but those are small, what I call small 40Bs. There's one on Morose Avenue that's like 6 units, and
Is there any further development as far as the projects out on 110? I mean, they were running out of space out there.
no.
Ever, can you read this one? Paul's done it.
How can Chelmsford accommodate the MBTA housing if there's a sewer capacity issue?
That's the reality of it, is much like the one at West Campus, you'd have to put on-site sewer treatment plant, which is costly to not only install but to maintain. That is the real constraint, and that's why we don't anticipate that there'll be a lot of development as a result of the MBTA zoning, because you not only have the higher interest rates today, the higher cost to construct these developments, but also the sewer thing, to put an on-site package treatment plant. It's not only the cost of constructing it, you've got to maintain and operate that 24/7, just like any other sewer system. And so,
Yeah, you can't
at a
put it on
development of 400
autopilot.
units in luxury apartments, it works, but it's very costly. And so that's why when we saw the proposed developments of the Mercury computer site on Riverneck Road, that was never explored as an option, because they didn't want to take that on. Because that would have been, they could have done a development at the old Mercury site, but that didn't happen for that reason.
What's
I
interesting
believe.
is that in the mid to late 80s, when you had a lot of the 40Bs just beginning, that was the only thing in Chelmsford that you could have as a sewer treatment system, or whatever you might have as on-site sewage or septic systems. And they were developing at that point, could be cost in comparison. And today, they don't want to do it because you would have to do that, but they were doing it in the 80s.
Yeah, the Radisson was.
Because
on
we
one of
didn't
those.
have it.
Yeah, the Radisson had one of those, yeah.
And that's how Glenn and I got more involved in local town government, is because in our backyard on 110, they were going to put a 40B in, and it was adjacent to Beaver Brook that goes into the Merrimack River, and they were going to put a sewage treatment system pretty close to that brook. And they were talking about it being on autopilot. They check on it on a weekly basis.
yeah.
And so we got very much involved in that, and at that point, you did have the sewer go down 110 from that in order to be able to have that built. And then when that went down, then that, when we had the sewer come in, that gave the option of
Hey, can you
of
guys
tying
say
in.
what's going in the Radisson?
It's going to be a Hilton brand hotel, so
Oh, it's gonna be another hotel?
yeah, so the portion to the left, let me explain, the portion to the left, if you were facing the front of the building where the rooms are.
Yeah.
That's being renovated as we speak into a Hilton brand hotel. The function and banquet facility is not part of the new hotel. That's being converted to an adult daycare at the lower level, and they have not brought forth plans for the upper level development. So what that means, John, why I'm taking that explanation, is there are not going to be any dining or, facilities in the renovated Hilton. I think it's Homes to You Suites or whatever it's called, of the
Is that
Hilton brand.
Moonstones? Are you
No, it's
talking-
across the street, that's on the other side, the Radisson is, so that's where the Moonstones is the west, is the old Best Western. So it's going to be very similar to what you'd see at the Holiday Inn Express next door. It's going to be a hotel, but really no dining or function capabilities.
Any plans for Moonstones that you're aware of?
No, that's what Bob was just speaking of. That's next to the what used to be the old Howard Johnson's.
Yep.
It's next to the Best Western. That's a restaurant. Has been a restaurant. We don't know what will go in there. I do know that the building, because of its age, like anything else, probably needs some renovation work and updating.
So Howard Johnson's is not gonna come
Not
back?
coming back. No, it's a great location, all the ground round, as far as we know. It's a great location because you're right near the highway, you're right on Chelmsford Street, 110, but we're not aware of any future tenant at this point in time.
That's why I hope Chelmsford doesn't make the mistake and load up like become Burlington, the next Burlington, because Boston and Cambridge, I know they have a lot of dead office space.
They do, 20% in Burlington, yeah.
Yeah, and the mayor in Boston, she's already given out TIFs or whatever you want to call them, to turn these into residential homes. And I believe that's what's coming to Chelmsford.
Yes, if you
They're
can
paying
afford to
big
live
rent
there.
down there.
yeah,
Go
well-
to Chelmsford, in
Right.
this new development, I bet you that gets filled quick.
But again, if they were to convert that to residential, you'd have to meet the sewer capacity needs, and that's a challenge, because we don't have the capacity in the system. And again, it's not just only the treatment system in Lowell, you also have sewer main pipes that are sized a certain size, so you also have flow issues in terms of even moving the sewer capacity, because, lines were built with a certain capacity. But yeah, if you were to convert the Moonstones into a residential, let's say you tore the building down and built a high-rise, well, again, where are you putting your sewer? Because, again, there's limits, and that's the issue, again, the issue in terms of transmission as well as the issue in terms of treatment, because you're right, that's where the market is. There's a demand for housing everywhere, whether it's Chelmsford, whether it's Massachusetts, whether it's New Hampshire, or whether it's across the country.
Places to live.
It's places to live, because people have small household size, and therefore, you need more places to live for residents. And that's going to be a big challenge going forward.
Well, for places to live, there are people that aren't living any places in terms of homeless. So do we have you seen an increase, a decrease? Are there any issues with what's going on in Chelmsford? We know, Lowell and things that they're trying to do here. But in terms of Chelmsford, on occasion you see different people that are out there that are, living on the street. Some of them want to. And I know that there's quite a number of people in Chelmsford that are trying to address their needs either through food, clothing, any kinds of different drives that they have. and, trying to deal with veterans and veterans that are homeless. So if there's anything like that that you can give as information, that would be helpful.
Yeah, CTI is a primary provider of homeless services, even in Chelmsford, much like in the city. They are serving an increased population in the winter months, and in fact, I think there was an announcement last week in the press about funding that's being provided to them, and that will be at the former Best Western site next to Moonstones on Chelmsford Street. Yeah, I think our populations are stable. In other words, we do have homeless encampments generally on the state property near the highway, near Route 3. We do have regular communication, believe it or not, between the police and the health department with those residents or homeless people up there. But we've not seen any spike in population. We've not seen any influx yet from whatever actions Lowell is taking on the homeless population.
Well, they're gonna go someplace.
They're gonna go
This
someplace,
is live
yeah.
shot of across the common.
Yeah.
We have a rooftop camera next door, I can zoom in on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This was always populated with homeless,
Mm-hmm.
sleeping on the common overnight. There's not a soul in the camera shot.
Right.
The big tell this morning is the empty barrels.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually there's a bunch of people sitting on the lawn of the Elliott Church.
Yep.
I see zero today. I see empty barrels. So whatever the city is doing to encourage these people to find another place to dwell is very effective.
Where'd they go, John?
Somewhere else, that's all.
Yeah.
Well, they just
That's- yeah, you're moving
moved
it
to another
around.
community.
Or they move around within the
But
community.
at least with this ordinance, they're not near schools. They gotta
I
be
think that was
1,000
one of the
feet.
issues.
Yeah, no
Because of
doubt.
the
Well,
drug usage.
yesterday Danny Rourke was here, the mayor of Lowell. He was here yesterday. And I always encourage him to tell the story of, he had a yellow school bus parked in the parking lot there at the Elliott, where the Tommy Shanahan's, the Owl Diner usually parks there, but he had a yellow school bus parked there. He had all the city delegation, all the city employees down there that could help the homeless, interviewed 200 homeless people and said, look, get on that yellow bus and we'll get you new clothes, we'll get you a place to stay, we'll get you a place to live. Out of the 200 people they talked to, zero got on the bus.
Yeah, 'cause,
So they're living where they want to live.
Right, I think they're
you
very
know,
suspicious of
when
government.
Paul mentioned the Best Western Hotel there next to Moonstones, there was a lot of people living in that building that were homeless. The state, I'm pretty sure state government's paying the bill. Because at one time we had over almost 2,000 families living in hotels. And we used to have to transport them, I don't care where they were from, all the way back to, let's say, Fall River from this area just to keep their kids in school.
Yep.
And then when, I think it was Governor Weld, I'm not sure what governor, they brought that number down to almost nothing. But Best Western brought some issues to that area, which could have hurt a business like Moonstones, I
Yeah,
believe.
those are individuals. The state doesn't mix families with individuals. So the ones
Okay.
that are the Best Western are homeless individuals, whereas what you see at the Inn and Conference Center tend to be families.
Okay.
In Lowell, and so, yeah, the state's very careful about, segregating.
But Chelmsford has this small amount, but they have their issues with it too, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, we're a little short on time, but I know that some people would like to know also in terms of Chelmsford, because we're increasing the diversity in the school system because there's so many different types of families that are being located, and actually they're buying property. But do we have any kind of the migrant issues that some of the other communities are seeing? Do we have those in Chelmsford?
No, I don't think we have what you would see. We have a large diversity of the population in the schools. I mean, you go to the center school or go to any of these
Yeah, I
elementary
understand.
schools, it's coming up, there's a diverse population where I would think a third of the families have non-English speaking, in the household. I mean, it's that diverse of a population. But no, we really don't have a major migrant issue within the community. And I think that's pretty typical of all the suburban type of communities. As you said, people tend to go to the urban area where there's more level of services, quite frankly.
How you guys doing for plows and stuff? You ready for the big?
Yeah, we're still short contracted drivers, so, when the snow falls, there will be delays, what you would normally see in terms of snow plow removal, just because we don't have the contractors stepping forward to do the work. So we'll prioritize the main roads, than the secondary roads, but it will take longer. People just don't want to do the work. Even if the town offers incentives that could pay for their insurance and everything else, it's a population that it's just very, that, because you don't know the hours, you don't know the demand of what you're going to be working into, and it does take its toll. And so we just can't get drivers.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah,
for
love
coming
having
on.
you here.
Want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. We will see you,
holidays.
this group will see you after New Year's, and everybody stay safe. We'll talk later.
Okay, you're gonna end the show?
Yes,
Sounds
because
good.
it's, Glenn said it's over.
All right, thanks, Ken. Merry Christmas.